What's up, everybody? Death and Narratives podcast. It's Phil. We got Conrad back here. Episode 12. We've been on a roll recently. Conrad just wanted to talk about his thoughts on the new U.S. Iran MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, which was allegedly supposed to be the Islamabad Accords. I guess they're now the Geneva Accords, which maybe will be signed and maybe will be complied with, maybe not, probably not, who knows. We'll talk about that. I have some stories of New York and some other things, and we have a new intro. So for all you new watchers, I think on Rumble, one of the episodes got like 100 raw views, so that's good. We're getting some fucking views. We're getting up there. YouTube, we got like 20 views. We're getting up there, son. Up, up, up. But I just like what we're doing. I think we're doing a good job. So I'm just gonna see how far we could push it. Just to make a podcast that we would want to listen to ourselves. So, but thanks everybody who is watching right now at a very very early stage. Yeah, let's roll the intro. That took a little bit, but all archival footage. And shout out to the guy who made that compilation because the intro music, he posted the video of the intro music, which is linked in the description. It's really good. It's like a disco remix of this like cult fucking Mao song that a bunch of like Koreans made about Mao Zedong, and they fucking helped him in the Korean War. So run that up. So yeah, new developments though. Back to the episode. Apparently, the Trump team, Trump admin, Trump himself has digitally signed an MOU. They're going to Geneva, I think, sometime soon. Was it the 19th or something? To sign this in person. It's not a treaty, it's not binding, but it is them sort of admitting a lot of concessions to Iran admitting some concessions to America, and maybe a framework for a larger deal, which I think our perspective has been that that's sort of silly thing to do, to negotiate them with these people at all. But what do you think about these developments?
Well, I think first I gotta say that I mean, I was watching the last podcast we dropped. And we're pretty wrong about at least in the short term, about pretty much everything we said in the beginning part of that, where things were heating up the other week, and it looked like, I mean, we didn't think that was going to come out of it. But so well, yeah, we definitely own that. Yeah, we didn't expect there to be any sort of agreement or ceasefire coming. It looked like things were escalating in the moment. But I do want to kind of reiterate that I don't believe that we're wrong in the uh, medium term for this deal, where this is going. I think it's not going to play because there's two other parties, right? I mean, we have the Israelis and Hezbollah, and Lebanon is included in this deal, in order for it to work, right? The Israelis have to stop attacking Lebanon,
Right.
and doesn't look like they're going to do that. Um, there's so many different caveats, right? This thing is like essentially it's going to be like formally signed in on Friday, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and the only reason this is really happening, right, is because for some reason, what we kind of suspect and what I've heard from a lot of people is that the Iranians are pushing this. The Iranian government and the Iranian policymakers, especially the new Ayatollah,
Yeah.
is pushing for this deal, um, brought on by pressure from the Chinese, who are, I think, essentially. I mean, this is not. It's really not a good look for China. I
Mhm.
don't know why they would be pressuring Iran to make this deal. I mean, I think they're maybe worried about the consequences of this devolving and getting out of hand, but it's already out of hand. It's already out of control. I don't think there's really any putting. There's no putting this back together. There's no resolution um, without a more decisive victory, because I think this has been a decisive victory for Iran, but it leaves the United States and Israel with too much leeway, and we're just gonna see a collapse in on the American and particularly the Israeli side. They're not gonna hold up their end of the deal. I think what the real question is, will Iran is Iran really gonna have the resolve to do what it takes to deter this and to keep the pressure on and to really do it? What you and I think what they need to do is to just they need to go after the Americans and the Israelis with everything they have. Like I don't think they can really. I mean, they're trying to be nice, play nice, and pull punches. Mainly, I think to appease like the diplomatic standing that they have with other countries, so that they don't look like the villains in this situation. Same reason that Russia is kind of going pretty soft on Ukraine. I mean, they're not going soft if you're Ukrainian, like you don't think that, or if you're Russian, you don't think that. But like, they could really bring to bear a lot more force if they wanted to. Iranians are kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
They're pulling their punches, and I think we're gonna see this draw out. I don't think this conflict is over by any stretch of the imagination. I think we're gonna see a new phase of war erupt at some point. And you know, the other thing I just want to say is like MOU or MOI, don't know,
MOU.
whatever. MOU, a memorandum of understanding, like is essentially it's like not even. I think I was listening to Nima. He had a guest on who was talking about this. This is some guy from Johns Hopkins, your favorite
Oh,
place.
nice.
Um, but he was essentially saying that an MOU is like it's not even as binding as like a handshake.
Yeah.
Like it's just
It's a
kind of
piece
a
of paper.
nothing. Like it's a piece. There's no. I mean, they're calling it a peace agreement, but it's essentially just like is the framework that could potentially lead to a peace agreement. That this is not over by any stretch of the imagination. The Strait of Hormuz is not. I mean, they've opened it to some shipping, but it is still under Iranian control, and they're still limiting the shipping that is coming through the strait. So it's not like this thing is coming to a conclusion, um, really at all. The Iranians are going to close it at some point again because the Israelis, particularly Netanyahu, have like a pretty big interest in keeping this war going, and that's what's. I think we're still right about it. I mean, I think that's just what's going to happen. It's like at a certain point, it's like it's at this point, it's just kind of chemistry,
Yeah.
right? It's not even like um, you're just putting like different ingredients. You put baking soda and vinegar inside of a bottle, and it's like you can't stop that. You can't in the middle of it like reacting, be like,
Right.
well, we can separate out the baking soda and the vinegar. It's like no,
Yeah.
it's happening. It's already
It's in motion.
a done deal.
Yeah.
So I I think I mean I also am just want to say, I mean, I'll kind of kick it to you, but for this, but I'm extremely frustrated with Iran for 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 signing this and for falling into this trap. I mean, I think it is an absolutely poor decision on their part, especially when they're winning, to come to the table like this.
Yeah.
And to think that this is like an appropriate time. This is exactly the time when they should be doubling down, and asserting themselves. Because there's just no trusting these people. The only thing they understand is violence and strength. Like these they don't. They're gonna take this as a sign of weakness. Anyways, what do you think? I'm I'm pissed about it.
Yeah.
I'm pissed that they're considering this. I think it's a stupid decision.
I think it's. I won't necessarily say stupid yet until it blows up back on in their faces, but I'll say it is at least a waste of time. I've been trying to make sense of it because, like you said, we totally were of the persuasion that this wouldn't happen because the IRGC hardliners and the political class is basically on the same page now. So how could this happen? But after that last podcast, I was listening to Pepe Escobar and Larry Johnson's new show with this dude Zulfikar, he apparently has inside contacts at the highest levels of the Pakistani military intelligence, and they have kind of been having this back and forth for the past 2 episodes that we have been having, which is he's been reporting, well, there's going to be a deal, and they've been going, well, why would they do that? And that's not going to happen, and then it happens, and then they're trying to rationalize it. And basically from what they've been saying is that, like you said, this is basically apparently Russia and China both pressuring Iran to take a deal through Moshtaba, who is agreeing with them. And one would wonder why, though, right? Because we have all the cards for Iran. They are getting concessions that they've never got through deterrence, through their kinetic warfare. And any cessation of that kinetic warfare stops that deterrence and therefore stops getting them real concessions like lifting of oil sanctions. So what would be the point of this, especially at such a critical time? Because the idea, I believe it to be from Iranian statements even, is to get, if Israel and America continue to do the war, which they have been continuing to do, they fired on Keshem Island, they hit the port of Bandar Abbas, they did a bunch of random little bullshit. Israel is still in southern Lebanon. They're still attacking Beirut. They're turning it up now. They're turning it into Gaza. Large parts of southern Beirut, Dahia, looks like Gaza now. It's getting quite dire. And so these things were continuing to happen. And for most of us looking on the outside in, the Iranians were saying, well, we're going to keep the strait closed. Remember when they fully closed it for a few days? And it seemed like, these people keep saying gas to $200 a barrel, if that had happened, right, if that trajectory continued to hit that, then it would have meant ultimate disastrous collapse for the American economy and probably a lot of others.
It still could easily happen.
It could happen in a month or two, in a year or two, in a week or two.
It could happen it really, yeah.
So and I still think, like you said, I think it's a bad decision, but ultimately I think it's a waste of time because, like you said, Israel will probably continue to destroy Lebanon at the very least. So then this is just going to be a week wasted that's going to reset us, because we've been here before. Been here before many a time, right? Same like Ukraine. How many talks did they have in Ukraine? And yet the war goes on. How many talks, how many fake ceasefires have we had between America, Israel, Iran, Lebanon, all these countries, and yet they're always an asymmetric ceasefire. A ceasefire which is used to make your enemy stop firing so that you can keep firing at them without having anyone fire back at you. So it's because they do this because they specialize more in genociding people than they do in fighting wars. So for them, they want, not only do they want, but they need, for them, their war machine, greater Israel, American imperialism, Western hegemony, for that to continue, they actually need people to lay down and take it and die. And they see it as an affront that anyone wouldn't do that. They see that as somehow against international law, somehow rude, somehow monstrous to do that. And so from their point of view, that's why they need these ceasefires, so that they can ultimately be violated, because that's how they fight wars, is against a captive population. So in that sense, I think it's foolish to do this. But apparently from this guy Zulfikar, which he's relaying information from highest of high in Pakistani intelligence, apparently the last strike that Iran did, which I believe was on Bahrain, Kuwait, some of the bases there, which had more powerful hypersonic missiles in them, even though they were some very small salvos. Apparently, those missiles were supplied to them by China. So what's happening now is that basically, and I think this is a miscalculation, but Mujtaba seems to be triangulating that Russia and China are fully backing them in terms of like helping their economy, I'm sure, stay afloat in some certain senses, helping their technology and their weaponry advance more. And now Pakistan, acting as a Chinese proxy, is helping them diplomatically to court every other nation in the region towards a new power structure with Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, etc. And so I think what Mojtaba is seeing is like, okay, look, here are the big players, the real superpowers, China and Russia, and they're supplying us all this stuff. And if they want us to try and make a deal because we're in such a great position right now, then why not? Let's try it. And I mean, they've apparently, according to this dude Zulfikar, half of the negotiation team that was like with the Jared Kushner Witkoff people, half of that team was very against that idea. That like, well, China's, supporting us. So if they really want to, have us do this, why don't we try it? Apparently half of the insiders were very against that. The other half were like, well, let's try it. Mojtaba seemed to be, the one to tie break there. But apparently they're also ready to retaliate if the deal is broken. So I think, like you said, that's going to be the big what if. If the deal is immediately broken and they're still trying to kind of do the JCPOA dance, where they're like, well, that, let's ignore that a little bit and let's, keep going and maybe we'll get back on track and maybe they'll give us a concession, and Iran just ends up in this fumbling, like outpouring of concessions to the West in some hopes that they'll maybe start to give them something that they've actually agreed to already. And that just ends up going on and on and on. If that happens, I think the soft liners have won. The calculating Chinese idea of like low warfare, no intensity, just keep business going, that idea has won. And I think that's very foolish. I think they've been there in the JCPOA. We've been there in the 12 Days War. We've been there 40 days ago. Now we're here again. And I think even the Iranian people, we see it on Telegram, that they are out, and a lot of them are protesting against Abbas Araghchi, who's, had a lot of support early on for becoming more hardline. Same with Pezeshkian, becoming a little bit more hardline and in line with the IRGC generals when this whole thing started, because people want this to end because they've been here before and they don't want to be here again. and they want to they want to solve this issue structurally, right? They don't want to have some sort of mediated ceasefire that takes years to like build up and then break down, then have, like this is what happened with Ukraine, right? There was so many talks, so many color revolutions, so many, Minsk agreements, and ultimately there had to be a war to end it, to usurp these certain people that are in this country trying to destroy another country. And at the end of the day, I still believe both with America and Israel especially because they're in the region, the only thing that will stop them is an army marching against them. Same with America. The only thing that will stop them, and their army's not there on the ground, but, a missile hitting a destroyer, a missile taking out every base, all of it, not just some radar, not just some barracks, every single base at the same time, flattening them, I'm sure that they have a stockpile to do this, And which brings me to why I think this is really foolish. And this does concern me a bit, but maybe this is just Mojtaba's just making a bad decision. But if Iran is saying that these new Chinese weapons, these hypersonics and whatnot, are so advanced that they are willing to sort of go along with the Chinese triangulation here to appease them because they want to keep this advanced weaponry incoming, then I just don't see why that makes sense, because Iran already has such a large domestic stockpile of drones and medium range ballistic missiles, and I believed their own domestically produced hypersonic missiles. So what is so new and different that we have to appease, the Chinese diplomats, which, let's just be real, let's just be honest, this isn't the days of Mao Zedong anymore, Mao Zedong marched through the fucking mountains and like 80% of his comrades died, and he kept fucking going, through world wars, through civil wars, to start the project, not to end the project, to start the project of a free China that would never be invaded again, with nuclear weapons, by the way. That took a long time, a very long time, from basically like 20s to the 60s, 40 years worth of struggle through multiple wars, basically, So, this isn't it's sad to say, but this isn't the China of that Maoist structural struggle against imperialism and capitalism. This is the sort of neo-Dengist China, which values, because its economy is based only on exporting commodities, pretty much, or not only, I shouldn't say it all, but largely on being the world's factory for things, right? So if they don't have the world with a growing middle class to buy things, that's bad for their economy. So that's it's a communist ruling.
They also, they don't rely on it as much, but they have a ton of foreign investment from places like the United States,
right?
That's who paid for all those factories to be built. It's not just domestic. It's like there is a and they do a lot of incentives, right? They do all these like special tax zones for U.S. corporations to come in. There's a huge desire for them to have good relationships with American capitalists and European capitalists,
right?
Well,
and for their economy to be stable, basically, so that they can buy the things that they're investing in them for, right? So I think this is lost on people. I think the Professor Zhang Siquin or whatever makes a great deal of this, this point, which I think is lost on people because they see the China-America battle as so, inherent, but they're very bound up in each other, right? And it would honestly be hard for one to fall without the other one feeling a great deal of pain. So, and I think that's kind of where China's coming from, even pragmatically, which, I mean, sucks for Iran because Iran, I think in its best interest. I mean, it's hard to be Iran right now in a certain sense because they they want to have that madman option right now, which kind of is the Strait of Hormuz, which is to say, like, we can sort of plummet the world economy into disaster. If this is our nuclear option without nukes, is I think how I put it in one of the earlier episodes. But which is such an amazing thing to have. It's much more moral, in that way, because they believe morally nuclear warfare is horrible. It is, because a lot of it just kills civilians, basically. What are you going to do? You're going to drop it in the middle of the desert somewhere, No, you do that for a test. When you use it, you drop it on a city somewhere, right? So if you cannot do that, but also have this huge effect that the world feels, then that's great for them strategically. But it has this double-edged sword, right? It's like people could look at that and be like, oh my God, America, Israel, you have to stop this. This is madness, or else they're going to plunge the world economy. Or they could look at Iran and go, Iran, you have to stop this. You're going to plunge the world, right? So it is a double-edged sword in that way. And I think a lot of people in the region now are sort of, and Russia and China also, the two largest economies, that are doing better than America, right? They're growing, America's dying, right? They're looking at this and they're let's be realistic, they're hedging, Same with Ukraine, they don't want this all out. This isn't World War II. This isn't, the Maoist Civil War, right? Because in those conflicts, Soviet Union, early communist China, they didn't have anything to lose, right? So they could struggle till they had nothing or no man left, right? And that's what they did, right? They struggled to, a great degree, and millions of people died. Industrial bases destroyed, right? Complete destruction of a lot of these countries and civilizations to the point where they had to fully rebuild up their whole economies. But now these economies are quite developed, right? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to manage a collapse. They're trying to manage a collapse. And I think Iran, to a certain extent, has been like that too. They've hedged. But there was something about this time that they felt that they needed to, and I think it's maybe in their culture, honor, this pride, because originally in the 12-Day War, there was like all these reports that like, oh, the Russians were trying to give them anti-aircraft weaponry, and I wonder now if the calculation has changed, because apparently China's anti-aircraft weaponry is supposed to be super advanced, and I wonder if that's what they're taking from China. That just occurred to me. I wonder if that's what they want to keep, because they had a big problem with, okay, we could strike Israel, we could strike all these things, but we don't have a way to like shoot down jets or bombers. So I do wonder, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it, because China allegedly tried to do that in Venezuela before the Venezuelan thing happened. They didn't really have enough time, I think, to do that, And I wonder if now Russia and China are saying, maybe we'll give you S-400s or whatever. That's, the most advanced Russian one. Maybe we'll give you, I don't know what the technical name for the most advanced anti-aircraft weaponry is in China, but maybe that's what they're doing. And they're trying to appease them so that they can build up not only their offensive capabilities but their defensive capabilities, right? This is so I can understand that. I understand that in the short term as a calculation, but once again, like we both said, in the long term, I think that's just silly, because you're really just prolonging what is inevitable, right? Which is a real all-out conflict with these people, which they have to be expelled from the region. And but maybe what they're doing right now, and I'm sure they are, is in the same way that the Israelis and the Americans right now are rearming and getting ready to strike again. I hope, and I'm sure, and I think that Iran is hopefully doing the same thing right now, right? Is going to China and Russia saying, give us all your anti-aircraft, give us all this advanced weaponry, give us, the Ereshnik type of stuff, the crazy hypersonic missiles, and, if this thing goes awry, which you really want us to do, it's a next step up the escalation ladder, and I just can only hope that that's what they'll do if and when this thing falls through. If it does fall through and they don't really retaliate and they go in this kind of downward spiral of like getting played with concessions to try and get something and they never really get anything, then I think it's like something, the character of this government has either changed or realistically gone back to what it had been doing before. And I think that's just for Iranian sovereignty to actually exist and assert itself, for the region's sovereignty to exist and assert itself, that's just, they're not going to have any sovereignty. They've undermined their own sovereignty then, They'll never have it until they go all the way, and they have that struggle, which is hard to do. I get it, because Iran's economy is still more developed than it was in the 70s too, right? So they're in a similar, path to Russia and China, even though they're under heavy sanctions and their economy could develop more. It's not like they have nothing to lose too, right? So after listening to Zulfikar's analysis, I understand it more on a level of logic. But like we keep coming back to, you can go up to a murderer, a serial killer, a sociopath, a crazy ex, and you can explain a lot of things logically to them that would make them go, you know what? I'm not going to do this crazy thing that I was going to do to you. But if they're not thinking logically, it doesn't matter if what you're explaining to them is logical and reasonable. If they're not logical, they're still going to be crazy and do crazy things. So that this is the problem at hand, right? Like, and even so, if you corner a sociopath and you say, and that's been killing people, and you've got him surrounded with guns and dogs and a mob of people, and you say it's over, give up, you have to turn in now, and he has like a bomb strapped to, or like a bazooka or some weapon that he could still do some damage with, Logically, that person should give up. They say, all right, maybe if I give up now, I'll get some sort of mercy, some pity. Maybe I'll be in a cell somewhere. I'll at least be able to live. But that's if you corner a rabid dog, it's not going to go, oh, damn, these people cornered me. I should calm down now. No, it's going to lash out more, right? So that's what scares me, seeing the neocons in this country double down. Some of them are backpedaling because they realize how crazy bad this is, but a lot of them are mad at this Iran MOU, and a lot of these people are trying to double down. A lot of these people who are whispering in Trump's ear, these Zionist pedophiles, these 13 families, whatever, bankers who control everything that want to just kill, destroy, and rape and loot. A lot of these people, when they have no options, they'll do their nuclear thing. And I can't say whether that's going to happen or not. I can't predict the future, but what we can do is analyze people's behavior. And the greatest predictor of future behavior is past behavior. I'm not going to say America can't come to the conclusion that it's going to collapse economically if it doesn't do X, Y, Z. So that, okay, we'll have to capitulate. I'm not saying that that's not possible or that's not going to happen. All I'm saying is, if you look at what we've done in the past, overwhelmingly, and you take all those actions into account, then you extrapolate what the next action would be. It wouldn't be to sit down at a table and go, you know what, sir? You're right. We fucked up. We'll give you back some stuff. we'll leave quietly so that we can rebuild and reassess and logically plan out our economy and our foreign policy and just restructure our whole kind of culture and civilization towards something smarter and better. I just don't see it. I just don't see it, folks. You know, it's sad to say. I want to advocate for diplomacy. I do, and I want to advocate for not increasing an already insanely hot war that could plunge the world into a deep depression. But at the same time, dialectically, I understand that in order to not have that continue to like happen in small bits again and again and again, we need to go through this struggle in order to, you know, create some sort of new geopolitical realignment so that what's happening right now can never happen again, or at least in foreseeable future of centuries and millennia will not be able to happen again. And I think that's the most important thing, which is hard to it's hard to explain that to people who are, you know, on the ground doing this political analysis day to day, trying to have their country not be bombed, you know, or have their economy not collapse. So I understand that, but I just think ultimately it's foolish and it's a waste of time. And I hope it doesn't signal capitulation on Iran's part, because Iran, what they're doing, I think has really showed the world such an amazing lesson. And for them to retreat now when they have all the cards, not when they're down, when they're up, would just be a really sad story. And I think it's a continually sad story, right? To see these countries which are maybe in a little pain, or under sanctions, or politically have some upheaval, have issues. Every country has issues, a lot of issues nowadays, but have a rich past and maybe a revolutionary spirit, maybe a large army, maybe a lot of people willing to fight for them. And to see the West roll over them without them putting up a fight, it's just depressing. It's just sad and depressing, you know? So we all want to see, you know, we all want to like be inspired by the one guy that stands up to an oppressor. And I don't mean to sound lib like that, but a real, you know, a murderous oppressor, you know, because once someone sees that, they get inspired and they're like, damn, we all need to do this. But it's very hard to be that person that stands up when everyone else is laying back. It can be very lonely, and you can do that your whole life, and no one maybe even notice until 12 years after you die, and then you've inspired something. But you may be very lonely. You may not notice anything at all, realistically, you know. And I think in a certain sense, that's how Iran maybe feels a little bit, because, you know, I think Russia and Iran especially, Russia is pretty much fighting all of the West on its own, you know. Iran is really fighting all of, you know, Greater Israel and the Middle Eastern kind of imperial pact on its own. That's hard to be in that space, you know what I mean? I mean, they have Hezbollah, which is doing great. They have Ansar Allah, which is doing amazing things. They have, you know, all the Shia militias in Iraq. But those are barely even states, you know? Those are things grasping at becoming states, you know, and I hope they all do. I hope Ansar Allah really takes all of Yemen, you know, and develops it and makes an army, you know. Same with Hezbollah in Lebanon, same with the Shia militias, but, you know, they really haven't. So this isn't like the Cold War, you know. People forget the Cold War was a lot of nations versus a lot of other nations, you know what I mean? China came to North Korea's aid in a huge land war right after they fought their own civil war, right? Which is right after World War II, right? Which is right after kicking it, right? So that, like, who in the region is like, yeah, you know what? We need to send 150,000 troops to Iran right now. It's not happening, you know? So we do have to understand that in a way too, um, from both senses dialectically. That position as something that needs to happen, that they need to stand up and do, but also that position that it can be very lonely, very isolating, very very hard for a nation maybe who has felt like they have been stepped on and lost a lot in the past years, and now may feel like, damn, we have people behind us, we have a lot of cards. Let's cash in our chips maybe right now. Let's see if we can cash in our chips and get a new reality without having the huge explosion of the region and the world, and have our cake and eat it too. Basically, have our struggle, which was only lasted 100 days, but have this new reality as well without going through that long period of kinetic struggle, which unfortunately, I think is inevitable. It's either you have it now, you get through it, or you piecemeal it out year on year on year. These things keep happening. It's what do you want? What do you want?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think that it reminds me of a lot of like organizing situations that I've been in where um, you'll start to be winning and the people that you're fighting against will offer you something, and it's very hard um, to go to people and tell them that they're offering you something and then have them, when they didn't think they're going to win to begin with,
Right.
to have those people turn that down. Just be like, oh, okay. Um, Most of the time they're not really, they're ready to just kind of go back to their normal lives.
Yeah.
Whatever. We got something out of it, even though we could get more if we keep going. And it's, usually the argument I'm making, but um, it's pretty difficult to talk people to win people over to keep fighting for more. They're usually pretty happy to settle for, especially when the expectations are super low,
Right.
and they didn't think they're gonna win to begin with. Um, yeah, I think I pretty much agree with everything you just said. Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely right about the weapons supplies to China, from China to Iran. I think during the last round of fighting, um, there's a point. I think the U.S. launched like something almost 40 cruise missiles, and the Iranians were, their air defense was like noticeably better at shooting them down.
Yeah.
Probably because there's Chinese weaponry there, or Russian weaponry or something. So I think that's probably a pretty good guess as to what's happening. Um, but I think, yeah, it is a mistake. I think it's a huge mistake. Actually, I think it's, maybe they're thinking that it doesn't really matter. They might as well try for peace, and if it comes back to getting in, they'll just be back at war. It doesn't matter if they kind of go back and forth. But I think it signals weakness,
Yeah.
and these people, they're negotiating with, they respond like, like sociopaths to weakness. They don't think of it as kindness. They think of it as something they can exploit.
It's like prison.
Yeah, it is. I think they do. They're sociopaths. They think of it
If they slight you, you have to fight them, and if you don't fight them, then it's like all the other freaks in prison, right? All these other Western nations, all these Israelis, then they know, oh, okay, I can fuck with this guy. I can beat him up. I can take his shit. And that's exactly how it is, And we'd love to say that we live in a civil world, and in that world outside of that, where you can just talk to people and be like, "Hey, pal, you didn't need to do that," and then not have fights with people. But that's not how these people are. They'll just keep coming and coming and coming, and unless you scrap. And I'll just say this: the lesson is, life is like poker. You got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. It's that simple.
Yeah.
You guys got a good hand. What did Trump say to Zelensky? You don't have the cards. He doesn't have the cards. Yeah. So hold them. Don't fold them. Don't be like, all right, let's see, flip the cards. No, hold the cards. You got good cards. Like, keep the dealer
I,
dealing. You know.
I think the other thing too is it's like, this seems to be like a trend with Russia too,
Yeah.
and which is hilarious too. I mean, just in kind of a tangent here, but like it's hilarious that they, um, because the Russians tried for 8 years after the coup in 2014 in Ukraine to
Yeah.
negotiate, and they're still trying to negotiate. They still keep taking meetings with Trump, and they keep taking meetings, or well, I mean, they're not talking to Ukraine really, but like they had accords in Turkey and years ago, and it's just they keep
And
trying to
the
negotiate.
Alaska Accords too.
Right, even though the Alaska thing was huge, and that fell through, and they're still doing it, and it's sort of hilarious because it's like the picture in the West that is portrayed of Putin and of China are like these brutal dictators
Yeah.
that have who are completely irrational with imperial ambitions, but it's like, well, who are, but they're trying to like allude to Hitler, or this image they created of Stalin. Um, but the reality is like the complete opposite. Like Hitler
Yeah.
wasn't trying to negotiate all the time. Like Hitler was like
Yeah.
just going to war constantly. Um, and it's just hilariously the opposite, because it's just complete. It's there's like in abusive relationships there's this term called darvo, which is like the someone who is an abuser will what they do is, to the person they're abusing, is they uh, defend what they're doing. They reverse um, the aggressor and the offender.
Mm.
They defend, they attack, reverse the order of who's the defender and
Right.
who's the aggressor, and create this like completely projected situation where like the person who is actually the problem flips the script, flips the narrative, and completely turns around. Says, no, actually, you're the problem. Like somebody's just like, say somebody's like beating their wife or something, and they're like some piece of shit is just like beats his wife every day, and his wife is like, well, why did you do that? And he instead is like, well, you know what? Actually, um, I didn't even really hit you that hard. Defend. But actually, the problem is because you put mustard in my sandwich, and I don't like mustard. Attack, reverse, and it's like, and actually, I almost choked on that sandwich. It was so bad, so you deserved it.
Mm.
Reverse the offender and attacker. That it's the same. It's the same exact thing with these people, except on a colossally more monstrous scale,
Right.
right? Like, however much you hate somebody who's like an abuser, like you should hate these people exponentially more, because they're doing it with entire nations
Yeah.
and millions of people, to entire populations, on a scale that is unfathomable. And Yeah, you could see too, it's like the Russians keep trying to negotiate, and the Iranians are now doing the same thing where they're constantly trying to negotiate,
Yeah.
and it's a mistake. And I'll give you a piece of evidence to support why it's a mistake, is and why they're just going to keep refighting this war. Last year there was a war with Israel, and
Hmm.
now we have another war.
Yeah.
It's like, they're just on track right now to have a war every year or every
Exactly. Yeah.
couple of months, and there's no like there's no recognition, I think, that there's no going back to whatever there was before, where they're not going to be in a state of war until they're victorious, until they have complete and total victory, where they've subjugated these people, these leaders, or there is like a massive complete leadership paradigm shift in Israel and America, which there will not be unless they're decisively defeated by either foreign or revolutionary forces within their own country.
Right.
Um, so I think, um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely understand your explanation. I think it makes sense. Um, and yeah, I am. extremely. I think it's just it's just becoming a very poor play. I think, and it, it just it's making. I mean, the Americans now, like now Trump and whoever is next. I mean, they just think they can get away with whatever because that's
Yeah.
what they're used to. And they didn't get away like scot free with this. I mean, there's still some serious, like $300 billion that they have to come like that they froze of Iranian assets. The Iranians want that back, and now the strait, which was toll free previously, is now there's going to be some sort of entrance and exit fee or whatever, environmental fee, whatever they're going to call it, to make it legal. And that there's going to be some sort of security guarantees where Russia and China are going to keep supplying them, but they are going to have to refight this. Like
Yeah.
even if we're like say we're wrong and this deal doesn't fall to pieces, which I think it will. I think at some point, maybe if it's not in the next week or so, it'll be in the next couple months. Um, it's going to fall to pieces. But let's say somehow they work out some sort of agreement. They last the whole 60 days of negotiating. They put together a peace deal. They sign the peace deal. Immediately, the Americans are going to just go straight to planning another war with them, right? That's all they're doing is just buying time for another war. And I think it'll be next year. It'll be 2 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just delaying the inevitable, which is another war, which which is gonna be worse for them. It's gonna be
Yeah.
more substantial. The build up part of why Russia invaded, the build up in Ukraine. People don't realize this, but the Ukrainian military was the largest military in Europe, including the Russian military, before the Russian invasion, and the most well armed. They were. It's not like the Russians were sitting there like, I think today is the day that we're going to take Ukraine. They're looking at this massive militarized hostile force just get larger and more aggressive and make diplomatic moves that are more hostile every day. And then all of a sudden they're joining and up with NATO, which they're already a part of. They're already de facto NATO force.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they're going now. If they're embedded in NATO, then it's World War III in the event of this war. So they have to attack in order to prevent World War III. Like that's what Russia did. Why they attacked? They were preventing World War III by doing that. Now, I mean, the Americans say like after the fact that we were just trying to egg them on. We weren't really trying to actually let Ukraine join NATO, but it's you know, frankly, it doesn't even matter, right? Like if that's up for discussion, in Ukraine, a place where, this so much Russian blood has been spilled over thousands of years because of invading armies, like marching through Ukraine in the same cities, right? The same cities they're fighting over today. They've been fought over countless times, especially during like the Russian Civil War and the Nazi invasion. There.
Crimean War. I mean, and
Yeah, sure.
it goes back. Same with Iran too.
Right.
And I just
Right.
wanted to make a point about the only reason why, and maybe people will see what we're saying as hardline, but the only reason why we understand the point that we're making about the inevitability of these people to be psychotic is because on a personal level, it gets down to psychology at this point, right? Which is why I like Zizek, because he starts from Marxism, right, and then it gets down to like Lacanian psychoanalysis, and you're like, how is it connected, But you go from like material production and war, and then history, geography, but ultimately, when you're trying to understand history, you have to get down to the why did this person make this decision, right? And I I can tell the audience, we have personally dealt with psychopathic, freakish Americans, and we have dealt with them after they've made horrible decisions for themselves. And you'd think that they would learn from it. You'd think they wouldn't double down. But they continue to double down and make their situation worse. And then they double down again. It's not logical. It's not logical, but we know these people. We've encountered them. We've lived amongst them. Let me just give the audience an example, and I told Conrad this, but I was recently in New York, right? And this is the caliber of people that unfortunately I'm around. I'm not going to say I don't like this guy. I actually quite like him. He's nice personally to me. He's one of my cousins, or first cousin, or cousin first removed, or second cousin, or however the hell it works. I don't know. But my cousin's son, about a little bit younger than me. And we're in New York for my sister's wedding. Congrats to her. And I didn't know what this guy did. He lives in New York. He lives in Manhattan. He doesn't live in Queens. He doesn't live in the Bronx, right? He lives in Manhattan. That should kill you. And I knew he had done real estate brokerage or something. He sells fancy apartments in New York, right? And I got this guy super blasted. So we're at this bar, after party for a wedding reception, and I'm asking him, so what do you really do though? When you ask somebody who has a desk job in America, so what do you really do? Is it some evil shit? You know what I mean? And he was very drunk, and he was like, I can't say too much. I've been signing NDAs. Our first red flag. If you sign an NDA for your job, it's just some evil person telling you, legally, this is so bad, you can't talk about it, So that's first red flag. And then he's basically saying to me, I kind of work for the Illuminati, and my first thought is, okay, it's bullshit. He's just fucked up. He's drunk. Then he was like, yeah, I was, because New York real estate, it's mobbed up, I was with the Russian mob. I was at the Yakuza were here. I was schmoozing with the Yakuza. I was like, what are you talking about, bro? You're with the mob. What are we talking about here, Then he's like, let's just say, do you know what the 13 families are? I've done work with the 13 families. And I was like, folks, for people out there don't know what the 13 families are, there's the crackpot Illuminati talk, and then there's the real Illuminati talk, which is, the real Illuminati talk is that there's basically these 13 families, Soroses, the Rothschilds, the Medicis, right, who come from these long lineages of bankers and basically Western royalty and Christendom. There's a Pope lineage, basically, that controlled the papacy for a while, whatever. And that basically these people, these elite families around financial, religious, state, royal, right, centers of power, actually control most of the world, and the politicians and the people you see running the companies and the lobbyists and all the media, they actually kind of get marching orders from these people, either directly or indirectly. There's a lot of, obviously, Epstein-like things going on. Epstein, rather infamously, in an email leaked from the DOJ, or not leaked, actually put out by the DOJ, said that, he said, and I quote, as you know, I work for the Rothschilds, so I'm sure he's in a way a part of the 13 families and, the real Illuminati. And it's a whole conspiracy rabbit hole, but needless to say, it truly freaked me out, because I've never actually met a normal person, because he's a normal person, talk anything about that, and that freaked me out, because that to me felt like it was real, because how else, why would he know about this stuff? Why would he talk about this stuff? It's also New York, downtown Manhattan real estate, which is notoriously mobbed up and evil, and so I'm wondering, right, to him, why? He's a 22-year-old kid, right? He's very good looking. I'm sure he fucks. He's going out. He comes from money, right? This is a nice family. It's a well-off family. No, it's not bourgeois. It's not 13 families, but we have some money, And I'm wondering why, right? and he's like, this is also a crazy thing, right? He tells me he's got blood cancer, and he may only have a few years left to live. That's what the fucking doctor's telling him. And God bless him. I hope he doesn't die, in a year or half or something. That'd be horrible. But to me, it's so confounding though, because it's like, I don't know about you, Conrad, but I was telling you this, like, if I had a year and a half to live, I think the last thing I would be doing is working for some Epstein syndicate and trying to make as much money as I possibly could, right? Like, that was his rationale. He's like, I just got to make as much money as I can to leave for my family or whatever, to, like, leave behind, whatever. Me, I'd be going, like, skydiving. I'd go to Iran and shit. I'd go to China, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, so this is, I don't know, it's sort of the mentality of the West. It's like, everything's fucked. Everything, nothing matters. We're all gonna die. And we kill everyone. They'll kill us. But while we're here, let's just set aside any sort of notion of good and evil, and let's just capitalize as much as we can. Let's get as much money, as much real estate. Let's traffic as many people. Let's fuck as many people. The hottest, the youngest, what have you. Let's drink as much as we can. Let's do as many drugs as we can. Let's go to as many parties as we can. And I'm obviously in downtown New York at this point, so it's that is really hitting me, And it's unfortunate to say, but that's the prevailing culture of America. And you combine that with a sociopathic attitude, it's a person you can't reason with. Unfortunately, these are the people who run our country. The people who run a large part of the Western world. So, one other thing I'll bring up, just on my New York hatred. We were downtown New York, right? And this is something about America that I don't think a lot of people in America and outside of America understand, is the latent, banal evil that is at your fingertips, right? And I think the reason why we do this podcast is because you and me, Conrad, we've encountered this. Not only have we studied it, understood it from a historical perspective, researched it, but we've encountered it. And I think for me that changed it. When people are always talking about Israel, and we're like, oh, doing a lot of noticing. I've been doing a lot of noticing, Lower Manhattan, Tribeca, where we were staying, and we walk by this building twice, right? There's this building, 33 Thomas Street, Lower Manhattan. Let me see if I can pull it up and share a photo of it. It is the only building in Lower Manhattan that doesn't have any windows. It is. Let me see if I can share this. Super freakish. Look at that. That looks like something out of a fucking movie. This building is allegedly an AT&T switchboard building, right? Okay. Number one, AT&T also has its headquarters at a building somewhere in Manhattan. I've looked it up. The building, guess what? It has windows. It looks like a regular building. So I don't really know why it would not need to have windows. That's number one. Number two, it was revealed in The Intercept, I believe, around 2012, that this building is actually an NSA spying hub. So basically, all the traffic that goes through AT&T switchboards, right? All the traffic from, I'm talking like undersea cable traffic, you know what I mean? I'm talking a large part of the surface web, the surface internet, not just domestic, also foreign, goes through that building. And it was revealed that it is part of NSA's Project Prism, which basically monitors the metadata of all internet traffic. And this is in downtown Manhattan. We walked by there with a wedding party to go to a nice dinner, an Italian place. And nobody bats an eye at something like this. And for me, it's just so crazy to me because this building, there's a lot of lore behind this building because apparently this building was built to survive an atomic blast. Apparently, this building has about 10 or so floors under it. There's like a huge bunker under it. Apparently, there's enough food and staff in there to last like 15 weeks without any outside anyone coming in or out of the premises.
Are you sure it wasn't built for Sauron's
Right.
eye?
Yes. Yeah. No, this fucking obvious Tower of Babel in the city called Sodom and Gomorrah, right? It's just a normal AT&T switchboard. It's just some normal infrastructure, you know. No, it's totally evil, right? It's totally evil and it's visibly evil. And yet, no one bats an eye at these things. They don't look it up on Wikipedia. You know, it's weird to me why we aren't down there at the lobby, fucking crowding it, going, what the fuck's going on in there? What's going on in there, bro? Does anyone want to fucking tell us what's going on in there? Because there's a lot of tunnels in Lower Manhattan. This thing has like 12-floor bunker, like. There's some NSA shit. I'm telling you, there's got to be some spooked out shit otherwise going in there. It's freaky. It's freaky. Like in a time, this is like some continuation of government site or something. You know what I mean? Like, and it's obvious. It's so weird to me, you know. And people, we're in Manhattan. Everyone's just partying. Yeah, well. Let's go to brunch. You know, I don't want to be too much of a hater, you know, because I had a great time. You know, my sister got married. It was actually really nice. But being in that part of Manhattan, especially, you feel the latent sin and evil around you. You know what I mean? It's just this is what America is. It was such a weird time, encapsulated in one weekend to like. Walk by this building, you know, stay right next to it, you know, and then have that thing with my first cousin or whatever. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he was like saying that he thought someone was following him and like yada yada yada, you know, that someone was like fucking, you know, for a couple weeks, like there was some dude that he kept seeing around, you know, freakish stuff. Like I'm not here saying that he actually works for the 13 families. All I'm saying is, when you start to understand this stuff, you think it's bad. Actually, it's way worse. It's actually way worse. So, sorry not to be a doomer, but don't. This is, and I appreciate Professor Zhang for this. What he calls this speculative analysis, right? You know, we can't necessarily have too much of a materialist analysis, because if we just look at this building. We just say this is a flat building with no windows. On Wikipedia, it says it's an AT&T switchboard, right? Yeah. But then if you look around the margins, right? You see this Intercept article. You go on the forums. You know, Mr. Robot kind of featured this, and it thematically it imbues certain things. You know, there's certain theories that stories you might, and those theories, those stories, those like whoa. It's built for an atomic blast, that can only mean XYZ. Those things that you would think, but that's just a crazy theory I have. That is actually sometimes, not all the time, I don't want to be schizophrenic here, right? And just say your weird, you know, ideas are like what reality is. But oftentimes when you encounter something like this that looks so out of place in reality, when you research it, you go dive deep down into it, you find these things on the margins of what it could be. That is oftentimes closer to reality than what you would ask the person on the street is, oh, that's a weird AT&T building. It's got no windows. Oh, no. It's much closer, right? So we need to keep that in mind here. Same with the American analysis, you know. We think these people are just stupid or, you know, they're just corrupt, you know. No. It's much weirder than that. It's much deeper and twisted than that, you know. Trump is in the Epstein syndicate, bro. He was raised by fucking Roy Cohn, basically, you know. I'm sure for some reason Melania is his Epstein plant that Netanyahu is, wielding tapes over his head because he's got some pedophile shit, which is, making him go to Pakistan and maybe try and sign a deal and then having him renege. Because, it's a hall of mirrors, is what I'm trying to say. That's why it's all these things are hard to track too, and they're very hard to analyze because we're talking about the psychology of very, very freakish and twisted people. Right? It's like watching a David Lynch movie, If you go in the middle of it and you try to understand what's happening, it makes no sense to you, right? Because he makes a movie it's just a thought to him. He doesn't think about it like a plot, like an A to B plot. He makes it like it's a dream or something. It has a certain logic to it, but it's not like the logic of reality. But if you start from the beginning, things start to make sense because they're proceeding in this weird way, right? So if you look at the MOU right now and you're like, oh, it would make sense for America to sign that. They seem to be in a bad position. But you have to go back. You have to understand who Trump is. You have to understand who Netanyahu is. You have to understand their psychology. You have to understand all the things that have happened in their twisted head.
Right.
And then think what happens after that.
Right.
That's the difference here.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think part of the one of the main arguments I think we all try to make in this show is like the leadership of America and the ruling class in America, they are inherently evil.
Yes.
And I think that's something that most people know at this point, but I think it's just worth repeating again and again. Like these people, they're just, maybe they seem nice or whatever, or they're able to kind of come up with a facade in public or something. But like, even now from the Epstein files, right? People kind of knew before the Epstein files that they were committing like these horrible atrocities and throughout entire nations again and again and again. And to be clear, those are the worst crimes that they commit. It's the ones where they're not even there. They're just having other people do it. At a level where we all kind of accepted it, and in a way, most Americans are kind of they share some responsibility for the crimes that they commit at that level. Which is I think why people don't do anything about it is because we're kind of wrapped in with those crimes. Our government is they kind of wrap us in and force us to be kind of part of it. And they look at us and they show us on the news and they're like, look at what America did. You're a part of it. I mean, most people didn't really do it, but they make us feel like we're culpable.
Yes,
Even
yes.
like the leftists that talk about it,
Yes.
we talk about nations doing things and not individuals doing things, and we're all part of the American nation that does these things. So in a way, when we say that, we're kind of taking responsibility for it in a sense. But that being said, right, even though those are the worst things that they're doing, the destruction of entire nations and millions of people, the actual behavior, the argument that they kind of facade they put up is like, no, we're just doing what needs to be done. In private, though, we're actually very nice, reasonable people. Well, what's actually come out is like, no, they're actually even just as heinous in private. We're heinous, more horrible, more depraved and criminal. To the point where it's not even. They're not even the fact that calling them pedophiles isn't even doing
Right.
justice because
Right.
they are pedophiles, but it's like that's just like an appetizer on their on their
Yeah, it's just a
charcuterie
Thursday.
board of just
Yeah.
evil crimes that
Yeah.
they commit. They're probably bringing a lot of these people are probably bringing somebody in to torture on a daily basis into their one of their mansions, um, and it just it's disgusting, and this is why we say, at the end of the day, is one of the core reasons I think that we support Iran in this war, and that we really despise the direction that what the
Did this? That's proving our point right there. If that's what I think it is.
No, like, okay.
That's what I think it is, bro. I
know who that is.
That is so funny. Audience doesn't understand what's happening, but all that we just said, it's just a cherry on top right there. That's just Exhibit A right there. Wow.
Yeah. I think we just have to we gotta really I mean, I think the direction the world is moving is a positive direction, and that this evil empire is going to be defeated. I mean, I don't think that, I know that, and this war in Iran, which was a complete own goal by the United States. I am really hoping that it has deteriorated Iran's powers, and or the U.S.'s powers, but the more the merrier. The more that they pile in on the United States,
Yeah.
and also its allies, which are mostly like governments that have been set up by the United States. The more that they're defeated, it's just the better.
Yeah, for humanity. I think one thing that I just realized in this discussion is that for us, since we understand that all this is inevitable, like you said, historically, this is inevitable. Capitalism dies, empires die, nations rise and fall. It's inevitable, and we see it happening, and we've seen it. It has been happening, and it will continue to happen, and it will accelerate at a certain point. And since we think that, I think maybe, and I know you are actually, a lot more conservative in your predictions nowadays than I am. I'm always ready to be like, in 2 weeks everything's gonna collapse. I'm ready for, what I mean. But I think not only because of the classic Marxist thing, right? Like they're all like, oh, you fucking Marxists are always predicting collapse, even though it didn't happen this year. It happened actually 5 years later, so you're wrong, right? I think we're ready to be like, well, it's inevitable, so, the next time there's an opportunity for it, we think it'll happen, right? It's funny because that mentality is for the average Westerner, especially a Westerner who's encapsulated in this hegemonic ideal, it's the exact opposite, right? It's, no, this will never happen. It can never happen, right? So that leads to all these, right? Like why the stock market isn't crashing right now on speculation alone, right? It's because the people who invest in the stock market, at least in the West, are obviously mostly wrapped up in American hegemonic ideals and thinking, right? So for them, they think, no, this can never happen. America can never be fully strategically defeated. It can never be expelled from the region. It can never be brought to its knees on a economic level, let alone a military level. There's no way. It's impossible, right? So that's why for these people, the things that we are constantly seeing as oh, that's an opportunity for another accelerating form of collapse for America, they somehow, like you said, the Darva, they reverse it and throw it back to the other. No, that's an opportunity for us to go deeper in Iran, right? I think that explains it. And there's another layer maybe to try and explain the psychology here. Um,
And yeah, I mean, part of the reason they're destined to fail too. I mean, it is it's kind of hilarious in a sense because the ruling class in America is so destructive, and they want to spread their destruction and their pillaging throughout the world and their parasitism of it. They're essentially parasites. I think that
yeah,
is probably the best description of them. I love that description because it's what is what does a parasite do? It feeds off of the energy and the life energy of something else that it's doing the work, or another type of like parasite or predator, right? They're sort of similar, right? A predator hunts something. A predator, I think, isn't quite the same level. We have a little bit more respect for predators
yeah,
because predators, you know, predators don't necessarily like torture the things they're killing. They don't necessarily. They just kind of go in, they kill the thing, and they eat it. A parasite, latches on to an organism. It siphons energy for over time,
yeah,
and it, often animal gets sick, and it just keeps leaching the force out of this animal that's unfortunate enough to have a parasite,
right,
right? These parasites, all they know how to do is be parasites, right? They
right,
don't know how to
right,
build anything or
right.
create anything. They just suck energy and and wealth and labor out of everyone around them,
Yeah,
out of everything around them, out of every system. And one of the things that they've done that too, right? Is the main thing that they're supposed to use to exploit the rest of the world. Like, look at the US military today, right? It's so depleted, and it's been so parasiticized. Like it is a victim of the same
yeah,
parasitism. Like we look at, right, this military. There's like $1 trillion that goes into this every year, more than that. If you include like the VA spending and like the non-discretionary spending, um, it's over $1 trillion, right? We don't even know where it goes,
right.
and the reason we don't know where it goes is because most of it is just lining the pockets of these parasites, right? They're not actually building up the military. They're not actually developing efficient, uh, a powerful industrial military. They're just looting it. They're just stealing that money and sucking the life energy out of it to the point where it's not even effective anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not even effective anymore.
Right.
I mean, they still have a lot of ordnance. They still make just enough because $1 trillion, like, you have to make something, right? You have to have something to show for it. You can't have
Yeah,
zero things to show for
yeah,
it. But it's honestly, it's fairly close to that,
right.
right? Um, they only have a few thousand Patriot missiles. It's just embarrassing,
It's
especially if
abysmal.
I mean, and today, right? I mean, we're just talking about like there's all the B 52 that just crashed
Right.
in, I think it was in California, because these machines are so old and they're so run down because they're not really replacing them,
Yeah.
and they're not maintaining them properly, and they don't have the actual creative output to make new things, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just a disease, right? They're a disease. A disease can only destroy. It can't create. It can only consume and destroy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the analogy. One of the things I immediately thought of out of that B-52 story was not just the physical manifestation of like a rusty old fucking B-52 bomber, um, that's run down and not upkept, but also the pilots, um, because one thing most people don't realize about the American military is that the incentive structure is based on sleep, basically, and everyone in the American military is, besides like officers, I guess, all the cushy people, is heavily sleep deprived. And in order to sort of maximize the amount of labor that they can squeeze out of all these recruits, they make them work, 12, 13, 14-hour days, basically, and then make them sleep, 1, 2, 3 hours here and there. And it creates this sort of zombie force of people, which is always sort of in a fugue state. They don't ever really know what they're doing. They don't really remember what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow, because they're all sleep deprived. And it's by design, but I just thought about that with the B-52, because imagine just like getting 3 hours of sleep one day and then waking up and being like, damn, I got to fly a training mission over San Diego or something in a B-52? Are you kidding me, bro? I wake up, I get like 6 hours of sleep at the farm job. I'm like, oh my God, bro, I have to do this shit right now. You start driving a tractor, and I like don't back up for the hitch to get the tongue thing, and then the hitch comes out and I go, oh man, this is heavy weaponry. This is large machinery. I'm not talking tractors. I'm talking B-52s, okay, F-16s, and I think it's very emblematic, right, of the state of the American military that we keep seeing non-combat fighter jets and bombers being destroyed. Just in training runs and in, I'm sure, just shuttling between bases, trying to do maneuvers for an air show, that they can't even do that, because the system is just so, it's so pushed to its limit that, it's like I was saying, on this farm, we have a lot of work to do, and we don't have that much labor for the livestock side. And it's like, if you have a car, right, or like an engine or something, right, and you just run it red line, and you just keep running it, it's like when it comes off the factory line and they choose one to like test and like they just see how long they can run the engine until it explodes, right? It's like, you can run that engine at its limit, you can run it for a while, but eventually it will reach what's called its limit, and that will limit its capacity, and it will break down, right? So if you run something at its limit, okay, sure, it can maybe sustain that for a certain amount of time, right? And this could be a person, an organization, a piece of machinery, what have you. But eventually, it's called its limit because once it reaches that limit, its capacity to do anything ceases because it will explode, get sick, die, break down, fall out of the sky, crash, burn, right? It will have to be rebuilt, healed, rested, replaced. And I think what we're seeing now is that America is fighting these, like 5 front wars, Ukraine, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, all that, low-key Taiwan, low-key Venezuela, Southern American theaters. And it's just too much for them. It's just too much. And they actually really logistically don't have the people. They really don't have the weaponry. And they're running at their own limit, right? And eventually they're going to break down, And I think that's what we see right now because remember that little foray that they did, the American military, into Iran, when they landed those C-130s and tried to like, oh, we're going to get the nuclear dust or whatever Trump thought that he was going to do. And
they were just rescuing a pilot.
Of course, right.
They needed like 100 and 200 people.
Yeah. He needed like some Mossad CIA agent girl that was like posing as a nuclear scientist. Blown up. Yeah, no, they didn't have 2 C-130s and like helicopters and fucking F-16s that were down. It's like, no, but they, an earlier American military, not to sound like MAGA or whatever, but back in the day, back in like the Gulf War, if it was that American military, that's not happening because they just have too many assets and too many people for some to get into a situation like this, right? This is such a Hail Mary fucking, you know, asinine blowout play to try and make this play, right? Like that they're gonna go in with like a handful of aircraft and some special forces guys, and they're gonna go in and do some surgical thing and like do a raid on the fucking nuclear facilities and like get the centrifuge. Doesn't make sense. Get a centrifuge that are like super fucking heavy, like thousands of pounds, right? And then like put them on a plane and like fly them out and then use that as some negotiating tool. It's so out of this world, and an earlier American military would have at least pulled it off or gotten into, the Isfahan nuclear bunker or something. They didn't even get off the tarmac, bro. They landed, they got people out, and then they got ambushed, and they all immediately started to run away, and they died, right? Like, so this is where we're at. This is where we're at with the American military, and they still have a lot of capacity to do stupid things like that. That's the problem, So, God willing that they won't, but because they signed an MOU of whatever, memorandum of misunderstanding. How about that? MOM. That's what it should be, right? But I think they'll continue to do these things. I really do. That's the prediction. And I think Iran's foolish if they really think that they can convince them with words that they shouldn't do these things.
Yeah. I mean, it's not enough. I don't think it's enough of a defeat.
Yeah.
To put these people. I mean, in a sense, you know, in a physical sense, right? It is pretty catastrophic, right? Like was in this last round of strikes, allegedly a hangar with like 12 F-35s got hit, which is like each F-35 is $100 million. So it's like that's okay, 1 over $1 billion. Yeah, it's like an absurd amount of equipment, and I think they've rendered them pretty ineffective at this point, but they're still around, and I think that as long as they have even a single asset left that needs to be dealt with, there's a point in like I like chess. I think this is a good analogy. There's a point in chess when you play with an even number of pieces, right? But once it becomes imbalanced and one person has an advantage, it really becomes very difficult, almost impossible for the other side. I mean, definitely impossible up to a certain point for the other side to come back, right? Once they start losing. And I think that's the point where Iran versus the U.S. is at. Yeah. Most people just resign, right? Most people who are kind of classy, like once they lose like a couple pieces, they know the other person knows more than the game. They'll just say, "All right, good game. Let's shake hands." But like, you can still keep playing, right?
Yeah.
The U.S. is just gonna keep playing, and if you if you get cocky, like. As the person who is winning, you can still lose. Like you can still fuck it up. If they still have a couple of pieces, they can still potentially get some sort of attack going and win. And if you just kind of think like whatever, it's fine. But they can just they can really just sacrifice all of their pieces in some occasions and get to a point where they could checkmate the king. The Iranians have to make sure that they have defeated the United States, right? They have to make sure that it is a decisive defeat. It can't be this like, whoa, we just want to make sure you can save face, so we stop this thing and it looks like it's a win for you. Like they can't. They have to cut out all the niceties, everything, and crush them. Like they really have to just absolutely destroy them in every single capacity that they can militarily for them to stop bothering them. I mean, it is really, and it has to be like demonstrated in a completely decisive way, and otherwise they're just going to keep going. They're going to keep playing the game that they're losing, but they're going to keep playing it.
Right.
You got to you got to checkmate these motherfuckers. You can't just
Yeah.
say like, let's just call it a game. We'll both walk away,
Yeah.
because they're not going to do that. They're still playing it. You know, they've signed onto this MOU, but they're still playing the game.
Yeah, and I'm not a big chess guy, but I know I've seen you and I've seen other people play where it does go down to that where they just won't resign, you know, and it can go on for a long time. It can go on for a long time, even though you have 5 pieces and they have 3 pieces. Going for a
Yeah.
long, long time, and you might still win, you know, but how many pieces are you gonna get down to, you know, and how long is it gonna take you, right? When, like, right now it's check. It's not checkmate. They did check, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like, all right, well, we could stop now, you know, and you could just walk away from the game and have your opponent go there, damn, I can't believe he got me a check, and think that he's just going to give up the game. But guess what? You're going to come back and you'll see he made a move, you know? So if you don't go all in on him, you know, and I don't even think that necessarily, like, I think it's so weird because it feels like everything that we're saying is only proved by what Iran itself has just done, right? So it's like we're learning these lessons by seeing them do this, which we could have maybe intuited, but we never, almost never would have expected that they would have already gone to this extent. And it's like, for me, you're already getting concessions. You've already got, you know, some oil sanctions that were lifted because of your blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, or sorry, your selective transiting of the Strait of Hormuz, which was a crazy thing to think that they would do. So why not do something crazy like that? Like, okay, let's flatten all the, you know, northern territories of Israel the next time they retaliate against us, you know, because if you did something like that, maybe then you could be like, hey, we won't do any more if you release all of our frozen assets, you know. So what I'm saying is from a realist perspective, from a pragmatic perspective, you know, you may not even have to fully fight it out, but if you keep making these crazy set pieces that really show them, hey, we can do this, and guess what? We always could have done this, right? If you keep doing these things to a dramatic effect, you may be able to get all the 14 points that you've already laid out, just, you know, by showing them what you could do. But if you stop doing them, right, then you're not going to get anything. You know, you've only frozen for the time being what you have right now. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, I'm going to reiterate too from the beginning. It's not. I don't think this this could, like, the state of this conflict is over. I don't think we're gonna do another war, you know, next year. I think this is gonna be the same war, and it's gonna keep going.
I agree.
And I think that even though we were pretty wrong about our predictions last time, which we didn't think the MOU would come about because they're in the middle of war, but you know, the Iranians wanted it. I think that the Israelis are going to derail this gradually. You know, with they're going to keep attacking Lebanon. They're going to keep attacking Hezbollah. At a certain point, the Iranians are just going to have to put their foot down because that's what they said they're going to do. They have to follow through. They can't, and you know, they've shown they're capable of doing it, but they will. Um, they will continue the violence. The violence is going to continue, one way or another. Maybe it's this week, maybe it's next week, maybe it's a month from now, but it's going to continue. Israel will derail this peace process.
Yeah, I actually really like the chess analogy because part of it kind of came to me when you were saying that. It's almost like, you know, when you're playing like computer assisted chess, and you can see like, all right, if you play this move, here's all the other possible moves, right? And it's just
Yeah.
showing you like, okay, if you play this move, then he'll probably take this, and then you'll have to counter with that, you know, and you're charting out, you know, either you're in your mind or by the computer, you know, the takes, the retakes, right? That's sort of what's happening now in the war is like, okay, if you put this MOU down and Israel bombs Lebanon, then Iran's going to have to retaliate, and then America will probably retaliate, right? So it is this thing that, even though it hasn't happened yet, you know, if you move this piece, that creates a cascading effect, which is, if in terms of, you know, strategy, right, known strategy, whether it's chess or war, will have to create new moves, right, which you can predict because these moves have happened before, both in chess and war, right? So that's why we're saying all this, because it's like, you know, if you move your pawn up and you're sacrificing it, you know, and it's like, okay, well, now you're calculating, okay, I I know he's going to take this, and I'm letting him take that so I can take that, and then maybe he'll move here to defend that, but when he does that, I'll take that, right? So that's just what's happening right now. You know, one move will lead to another, right? Which leads to another, to another, to another, you know? Just because you haven't made the move yet doesn't mean it's never going to happen, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just yeah, you're right. I think it's we're we're watching kind of we're kind of making a prediction, but I think it's less of a prediction and more of more of it like a trajectory. Like it's
Yeah.
like watching something fall from the sky and it hasn't hit the ground yet, and you're like, that's gonna break into a million pieces. Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I think we know that the Israelis are gonna attack Lebanon again. I think they violated the ceasefire 15,000 times. Like it's gonna happen,
Yeah.
and the agreement, the memorandum of understanding. It's like, you know, even just the word. Like, think about that. Just like that such a meaningless sounding term. Like a memorandum of understanding. Like,
Yeah.
imagine if you and I were like, we have a memorandum of understanding. You won't eat the ice cream. It's
Yeah.
like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I would probably
It's like,
still
don't
eat your
eat the ice
fucking ice
cream.
cream.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you just said a memorandum of understanding. That doesn't mean anything. Like,
Yeah.
if you said we had an agreement, like that's something. But like, that's not even a fucking.
Yeah.
This it's just such a meaningless sounding word
No,
on its own.
it's such a made up thing. And you think if we were really serious about this at all, that America would actually have some sort of memorandum of understanding with Israel, you know, someone who's party to the conflict. And yet you have these Israelis, you know, Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and they're already saying like, you know, this doesn't apply to us. This doesn't change our political calculation in any way. Don't worry, we're going to keep doing war. You know, it's like, okay, if we were really serious about this, like we think Trump being like, oh, you know, tweeting some shit about, I said the F word to Netanyahu, I'm really serious. It's like, dude, come on, get real. You realize Ronald Reagan picked up the phone to these people and told them, we will not supply you with weapons if you keep doing what you're doing in Lebanon. It's that simple, folks. Like, has Trump ever done that? I highly doubt it to Netanyahu, someone who probably controls him, you know, through money and blackmail and, I don't know, religious, psychological warfare that he's done with all his plants, you know, that do all the fucking weird, you know, oh, let's have a fucking prayer service in the Pentagon and shit. You know, all this Mossad bullshit. It's like, I just cannot see him picking up the phone to Netanyahu and saying, you're done. You're cut off if you do this. They're part and parcel, so, right? And then this is the chess thing, right? If that doesn't happen, then Israel continues to bomb Lebanon. Then Iran has to respond, right? Okay, so now we've restarted the war. Now we're back where we were a week ago. So what, are we going to keep trading pieces until it's just, king, queen, and a rook or something? Or are you going to go all out and move all your pieces up?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add at this point. I mean, I'm just sort of reiterating that.
Yeah.
Uh, this deal is stupid, and it's not the end. And uh, you know, I'm gonna honestly be really disappointed if somehow they manage to close this. The Iranians, capitulate to this because they're just signing their own future refighting of this war.
Yeah.
So, and it's gonna be potentially worse, right? Like if this happens 3 years from now again, right? It's gonna be a ground invasion by the United States. Anyways.
Yeah, well, we've harped on it enough, but a good episode. Sad to see what's happening with Iran and that the American economy isn't collapsing tomorrow. I think that's just always bums me out to wake up and know that.
It's still probably gonna collapse.
Yeah.
This doesn't.
But I want it now. I want it now.
Dude, it could literally be 2 weeks from now. That's how much the strategic reserves are left. Potentially is only a couple weeks left.
But we made some predictions. We'll see. We'll keep following this. I think this is the moment of our time right now, the Iran war. But I did like relaying stories and stuff. I do like that. So yeah. Hope you guys like the new intro. Worked on it a lot. This is episode 12. Talk to you guys later. Peace.